Hello, class. May the force be with you. Good to see everybody. Tell you what, I'm going to wait a couple of minutes. There's only a couple people online at the moment. Now we've got 4. Good to see everyone. We're going to review today. This is our last class period of the semester. And hi, Jared. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Megan. Good to see everybody. Welcome to our final class. Sorry that I'm a couple minutes late today. It's raining outside, and I am still dealing with the woes of having a new computer. But I'm excited to be with y'all today for our final class. And did y'all see the PDF that I put up on Canvas with 10 topics for 10 different questions? What we're going to do today is we're going to review for the final exam, and I want you to try to pull this up off Canvas. There's going to be, well, go ahead and pull that up. Let me know when you have that pulled up. And then I'm going to explain a little bit about my thinking for the final exam, because I've had to switch courses due to this coronavirus stuff. It's been a very strange semester. Good. Okay, y'all. I know that the semester says some things about the final exam. Due to the coronavirus thing, though, I'm going to have to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to change the way that I do my final exam. This will not be a disadvantage for you, and I don't think it'll be a radical advantage. I think it'll be about the same as it would have been otherwise. But what I want to do today is I want to review for your final exam. Let me just say that your final exam, unlike what it says on the syllabus, your final exam this semester is going to be 10 multiple choice questions, okay? It's going to be 10 multiple choice questions. It will be administered through Canvas. Earlier, I said something about, and I will put all of this in an additional announcement on Canvas, but earlier I said that it was going to be, that I was going to have you email me something or submit something through Canvas. I'm not going to do that. It's going to be an automatic quiz, which you will take through Canvas. Canvas will automatically grade it and then put it into your course average for your grade. There's going to be 10 multiple choice questions. None of them will be surprises. And what I want to do for this class period is go through 10 different topics based on this PDF that I put onto Canvas. Who can tell me what number 1 says? Well, who can tell me what number 1 says? Emily, good to have you. Who can tell me what number 1 says on the PDF that I uploaded? Very good, Jared, Parmenides. So y'all, what that means is that the first question on the final exam is going to deal with Parmenides, okay? The second question will deal with Heraclitus. The 7th question will deal with Aristotle on God. The 9th question will be a question over the Nietzsche documentary. That's how I'm going to do the final exam this semester. 10 multiple choice questions. These are the topics for each question. And ordinarily what I do on the last day of class is I break the class up into groups, and then I give them the actual final exam. And then I don't ever give answers to the questions on the final exam, but I break people up into groups, and then we talk through the final exam on that last class period. We can't do that today because of coronavirus and the fact that we're doing this class virtually. So instead, I thought of the next best thing, and we're going to do 10 multiple choice questions. We're going to talk I'm going to give a review class today, and we're going to cover each of these 10 topics. And so if you watch this class, and if you've been working throughout the semester and you understand the basic concepts, then I think you have every reason to believe that you will do well on the final exam. Okay. Now, there is one thing I want to do before we tackle the final exam, and that is to sort of finish up our course section on Friedrich Nietzsche. Who can remind me what the name of the article or the essay was that Nietzsche wrote? Who can remind me of that? What essay by Friedrich Nietzsche did we read together and discuss for this class? Unfortunately, we did not finish the essay, but we got through most of it, and I think we got through enough for you to have a good idea about what Nietzsche thinks. Who can tell me what the title of that essay was that we read this semester? Good, the Dionysiac worldview. Thank you very much, Jared. So what I want to do before we tackle the final exam, and Jared, I want to ask you to help me be timekeeper today. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But what I want to do is I want to, if you look at this review sheet for the final exam, and if you think about the course at large, the course as a whole, and you look at questions 1, 2, and 3, I think that you could call that moment 1 of our class. In other words, the pre-Socratics, right? Parmenides, Heraclitus, Cratylus. Then, if you think about questions 4 through 7, you might think of that as moment 2 of the class, Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so you've got moment 1, the pre-Socratics, moment 2, Plato and Aristotle, and then moment 3, I think you could call Descartes, which unfortunately that's whenever coronavirus hit and our semester was radically interrupted. But I think you could call Descartes, that's number 8, moment 3 of our class, and then numbers 9 and 10. Hey, Mason, that's a good question. Do we have a date for the final exam? Y'all, I actually don't know that. It would be super awesome if maybe someone could find that information and post it during this actual class. Let me say this. So ordinarily the university publishes a date and a time and a room during which our final exam will take place. What I was going to do is just have that same time window, the window during which you would take your final exam. Instead, it's come to my attention that sometimes students have trouble gaining access to the internet, and I wouldn't want to sort of discriminate against anyone in that way. I mean, so for example, someone told me that maybe some of my students might live in rural areas and they literally have to go to McDonald's to try to get online and stuff like that. And so I want to be sensitive to that. And that is why what I've decided to do is basically on the day of the final exam, whenever it's posted by the university, and if someone could find that, very good, Benjamin, thank you. The final exam is scheduled for April 29 from 5 to 7. On April 29, that is a Wednesday, from 5 to 7. What I want to do is I'm going to give y'all April 29, that's Wednesday. I'm going to give you from 12 o'clock noon to 9 p.m., okay? 12 o'clock noon from 9 p.m., that is when your final exam will be open on Canvas for you to take. That way you can have some flexibility. If anyone has any issues with that, contact me and you know that I will work with you. But that's what we will do. We will schedule the final exam to be taken on Canvas. You don't have to email me anything. You just take the quiz, but it's really a final exam. It's worth 100 points. You're going to take that on Canvas on Wednesday, April 29 from 12 o'clock noon to 9 p.m. Okay? Does that clear that up? Thank you very much for asking that, Mason. And thank you, Benjamin, for your help. Back to the review sheet, which is on Canvas. Moment 1 is Parmenides, Heraclitus, Cratylus. Moment 2 is Plato and Aristotle. Moment 3 is Descartes. And then moment 4 would be Nietzsche. Okay. Richard, no. Richard asks, will the final exam grade weight change? No, it will not. It's still going to be worth 100 points, just like the syllabus says. Okay. So y'all, what I want to do is before we sort of tackle the review of the final exam, what I want to do is think about Friedrich Nietzsche. And I want to think about Nietzsche in terms of moment 1, in terms of moment 2, in terms of moment 3, and in terms of moment 4. Actually, number 4 doesn't apply because that is Nietzsche. But in terms of the pre-Socratics, Plato and Aristotle, and Descartes, let's think about Nietzsche. So let me ask you this. In your opinion, do you think that Nietzsche is more like Parmenides, or I'm going to say Heraclitus / Cratylus? What do y'all think about that? Is Nietzsche more like Parmenides or Heraclitus / Cratylus? And tell me why. Tell me why you think that. Richard, okay, Richard, why do you say that Nietzsche is more like Parmenides? And do y'all agree with that? Jared says Heraclitus because he's big on everything being in flux. That's exactly right. Richard, think about Nietzsche's metaphysics, how he follows Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer thinks that the world at bottom is this Das Ureine, the primordial will, the primordial one, where everything is a chaotic vortex of forces. Grayson says Heraclitus because all is flux. That's right. Mason says Heraclitus also believes that everything is in a constant state of change. That's right. So Richard, Parmenides is the guy. We're gonna review Parmenides in a moment, but I would just say that Nietzsche is more like Heraclitus because Heraclitus thinks that nothing is real. Heraclitus and Cratylus think that you can't step in the same river once or twice, depending on which thinker you're talking about, because things are always changing. And because things are always changing, there's no such thing as a stable identity, right? Nietzsche thinks that everything that we see in the world is a construct. He thinks that the true nature of reality is radically nihilistic, that nothing makes sense, that there's no such thing as science, that the world is a blooming, buzzing confusion. And that reality is so traumatic for us that we have to sort of cover it up and provide therapy for ourselves through art, right? And in particular, through Greek tragedy. That's what Nietzsche thinks. And that's way more like Heraclitus than it is like Parmenides. Now, Richard, does that make sense to you? I would argue that Nietzsche is more like Heraclitus than he is like Parmenides because he doesn't think that anything's real. I mean, at least Parmenides thinks that being is real. I hope that makes sense. Very good, Richard. Okay, so that takes care of moment 1. By the way, let me ask. Let me make another. Let me provide some confirmation that Nietzsche is more like Heraclitus / Cratylus than he is like Parmenides. Remember what my imaginary Aristotle says to Parmenides? What does Aristotle say to Parmenides? He says, Parmenides, you thought that you were talking about being, but in reality, you were talking about what? What does Aristotle say? That's right. Richard, Zach, Justin, and Mason, God, right? And does Nietzsche believe in God? No, he doesn't. And so you see, Parmenides, he doesn't call being God, but when he describes being, he's talking about what other thinkers traditionally regard as God. And so Nietzsche rejects God. Notice Parmenides and Heraclitus don't really talk about God. Apparently, they don't believe that God or think that God is real. And so that's another sort of confirmation that Nietzsche is much more of a Heraclitan thinker in line with Cratylus than he is like Parmenides. Okay. Parmenides, in other words, believes in stable being. He thinks that there is at least one thing with a stable identity, and that is being. Whereas Heraclitus and Cratylus say everything's in flux, everything's always changing. There's no such thing as a tree. You might think there's the tree, but it's really a construct. There's no such thing as stable being, no such thing as stable identities. And so I think it's clear that Nietzsche agrees more with Heraclitus / Cratylus than he does with Parmenides. Okay? Very good. That takes care of moment one. Nietzsche would say Parmenides bad, Heraclitus, Cratylus good, right? Let's go to moment two. Let's talk about Nietzsche sort of with respect to Plato and Aristotle. Let me just ask you this. Which of those two thinkers, Plato or Aristotle, do you think that is most similar to Nietzsche? Which of those two thinkers resonates most with Nietzsche? And someone tell me why. And I'll give you a little hint. I want you to think, as you think about this question, I want you to think in terms of mythos or story versus science or system. Which is Nietzsche more like, Plato or Aristotle? Let me ask you this. Okay, good, Mason. Moment two encompasses Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so moment one, which is questions 1 through 3 on the little PDF, encompass moment one, and I'm calling that the pre-Socratics. Moment two, which is questions 4 through 7, is Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so we're on moment two right now, and Jared says that Nietzsche is more resonant with Plato, and that's right. And that is because, let me ask you this. Who is a more systematic thinker, Aristotle or Plato? Marissa, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. Who is a more, so let's back up a little bit. Is Nietzsche a systematic thinker, yes or no? Is Nietzsche a systematic thinker, yes or no? That's right, Jared. That's right, Aristile. Nietzsche is not a systematic thinker at all. He writes in aphorisms. He believes in art. He wants a revival of mythology and myth. Nietzsche doesn't like science. Nietzsche is, I would say, an anti-systematic thinker. Now, who is more systematic? Again, who's more systematic, Plato or Aristotle? Yeah, who is more systematic, Plato or Aristotle? That's right, Justin, Aristotle. That's right, Grayson. Aristotle is a more systematic thinker. Remember how he has the system of sciences? You start with logic, and then you move to physics, and then you move to metaphysics. That's a system. It's a system of interlocking disciplines of science, right? So does Aristotle like that kind of thing? No, he doesn't. He thinks it's BS. He thinks it's a power play. He doesn't think that it's real. And so tell me how, let me ask you this. Did Plato write in a systematic fashion? Yes or no? Think about the Apology. Think about the Meno, the Aristotelian dialogues that we read. Does Aristotle write in terms of a system? Plato writes a lot of stories. That's right, Jared. Plato's works have characters, they have plots, they have good guys and bad guys, they have settings. That doesn't sound like a system to me. That sounds more like a story. That's right, Emily. So you see, what I'm arguing in this class is that Nietzsche actually is more like Plato because both Nietzsche and Plato are non-scientific or maybe even anti-scientific thinkers. Okay, good. Now, y'all, we've now connected Nietzsche to moment 1. We've now connected Nietzsche to moment 2. Let's see if we can now connect Nietzsche to moment 3, which is Descartes. And here's my thought on this. You know how Descartes says that if I can't find something to know with certainty, right? Descartes is all about certainty. He thinks that he has, in order to know anything at all, he has to find something that he's certain of. And then once he finds something that he's certain of, he thinks that he can build on top of that foundation and construct a system of knowledge, right? Now, who can remind me what the thing is that Descartes thinks is certain? Who can remind me of that? And I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. But what's the thing that Descartes says, aha, I found something that's certain that I can use as a foundation to build other sort of levels of knowledge on top of? Mason, you say thought thinking itself. Okay, you're not wrong, but that phraseology goes along with Aristotle. That's right, Jared, the cogito or the I think, therefore I am, right? That's right, Zach. I exist. John, no, it's not I exist. And Justin, the reflexive thing. I mean, Descartes does believe in a reflexive thing just like Aristotle does, but I'm looking for the way he phrases the reflexive thing. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That's right, Emily. And so you see, Descartes says, aha, I finally found a certain bedrock of truth that I'm absolutely certain of. And it's on top of that foundation that I'm going to build, or see if I can build, other systems of knowledge. But here's what I want to say about Descartes, connecting him to Nietzsche, okay? Descartes says, if I can't be certain of something, then I can't know anything at all, right? Now, yes or no question. Does Descartes think that he has found something that he can be certain of? Yes or no? Does Descartes think that he's found something that he can be certain of? That's right, Justin. That's right, Jared, Joseph, Zach. Very good. Descartes does think that he's found something that he can be certain of. And therefore he says, okay, on the basis of that thing, the cogito, the I think, therefore I am, on the basis of that, I construct more and more knowledge. But let me ask you this. Does Nietzsche think that he's found something that he can be certain of? I'm just going to tell you the answer is no. Nietzsche does not think that the human mind, that human reason, that the thinker, that the scientist can be certain of anything. He does not think that is an option for the human person. But he's in agreement with Descartes that in order to know anything at all, you have to find certainty, right? They both agree on that. It's just that Descartes thinks that he has found something that's certain, and Nietzsche thinks that it's impossible to find something that's certain. But they both agree on the if-then statement. They both agree that if you can find something indubitably certain, then you can have knowledge of other things. In other words, they both agree that unless you can obtain certainty, you can't know anything at all. On that, they both agree. And so you can see that in that sense, Nietzsche agrees with Descartes on the necessity of finding something certain in order to know anything at all. It's just that they disagree that that human beings can achieve that kind of certainty, okay? But that is the way that I'm connecting Nietzsche to Descartes, and that gets us through moment 3, okay? Now, y'all, I just wanted to sort of begin the class by talking about Nietzsche. We didn't get to fully discuss that article, and so I didn't want to move on to the review until we said a little bit of last words about Nietzsche. Does anyone have any questions about Nietzsche? You'll notice that the last 2 questions on the final exam are about Nietzsche. And we'll get there in a moment, okay? Justin, not to get off track, but wouldn't the fact that Nietzsche came to the conclusion that he can't find anything certain at all be a certainty to him? That's a great question, Justin. I just don't think that he's certain of that. Yes, he came to that conclusion, but I don't think that he would say that he's certain of that. But that's a really good question. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about Nietzsche? That's a good question, Justin. That's the kind of question that philosophers like to ask and that are very important. Any other questions about Nietzsche? If not, why don't we go ahead and launch into our final exam. And y'all, the first question is going to be about Parmenides. And by the way, I want to say that earlier today, I did actually make the exam, but then because I have a new computer, I actually lost it. So I haven't actually made the final exam yet, but I want you to know that the material on the final exam, here's what I want to say. The material in the final exam will be contained in this lecture today, as well as the lecture that I gave on March 23rd. I actually want to double check that real quick. On the first day that we started live streaming, I gave sort of a review session. You know what? I'm not going to risk that. I'm worried that I'll sort of kick this session offline. But I gave a review session, I think, on March 23. It was the first one of these classes that we did on YouTube live stream, and I gave a review of the entire semester. I want you to know that's right, Marissa, 10 questions. I want you to know, hey, Mason, you're going to have from noon to 9 p.m. to complete the final exam, okay? Noon to 9 p.m. So you can take 9 hours to do it, or you can take 30 minutes to do it, okay? But it'll be 10 multiple choice questions. And on that, I want you to know that the final exam will be based on the content of this lecture, as well as the lecture on March 23, which was the first live stream that we did together, in which I did a review of the entire semester, okay? But let's do Parmenides first. Let me ask you this, class. What is the first thing that you think of when you think of Parmenides? Or when you think of Parmenides, what's the most important thing or the big thing or the main thing that comes to mind? Who can tell me something important about Parmenides? Whack-a non-being. That's right, Jared. That's very good. Whack-a non-being. That's right. Now, y'all, who can tell me, like, what is non-being? That's right. Whack-a non-being. Now, what is non-being? How does Parmenides describe non-being? Don't talk of being. Change is a form of non-being. That's right, John. Very good, John. Change is a form of non-being. What else is a form of non-being? Change, what else? Anything that changes? Good. Jared says diversity, spatially extant. Okay, Jared, you're right, but I'm going to say instead of the word diversity, which I did use that, so you're not wrong, I'm going to say multiplicity. Change, multiplicity, and spatial extension. Not spatial extant, but spatial extension. Okay, that's right. Those and parts and wholes, right, Benjamin? That's very good. Parts and wholes. Another way to say parts and wholes is composite or composition. Good. Those are all forms of non-being for Parmenides. And so Parmenides says, don't even think about that. The moment you think about change or multiplicity or spatial extension or the composition of parts and wholes, whack a non-being and don't even think that stuff, okay? Because being is one, being is simple, being is unchanging, being is not consisting of parts and wholes. It does not change, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked a little bit about in the class, this probably won't be on your final exam. This probably won't be on your final exam, but I do just want to say that when we talked about Parmenides in the class, we also talked about the notion of divine simplicity. Divine simplicity is basically this idea that God does not have a body, God does not change, God does not consist of parts and wholes. And in my view, Aristotle's sort of the first one that started talking that way, but he got it from Parmenides. He looked at Parmenides and he said, Parmenides, your description of being is amazing. How you say that being does not change, it does not consist of parts and wholes, it is not spatially extended, et cetera, et cetera. You're so onto something, Parmenides. The only thing is you're not talking about being, you're talking about God. So yeah, the point is that anytime you think about diversity or multiplicity or parts and wholes or change, you immediately need to stop thinking about that because those things are not being, they're non-being, and therefore they're not real, okay? Parmenides says you should only think about stuff that's real, okay? Good. Y'all, are there any questions about Parmenides before we move on to Heraclitus? Any questions about Parmenides before we move on to Heraclitus? Chase says the oak tree doesn't exist because it was once a seed. I like that, Chase. Now, Chase, the oak tree doesn't exist in whose opinion? In whose opinion? Is that your opinion or is that someone else's opinion? That's true in the opinion of Parmenides, right, Chase? Very good. Okay, y'all, I don't hear any questions about Parmenides. So why don't we move on to Heraclitus? Heraclitus basically says the opposite thing from Parmenides, right? If Parmenides says that nothing is changing, that nothing consists of flux, what does Heraclitus say? What does Heraclitus say? Everything is flux. Everything is in a constant state of change. That's right, y'all. And so what I want to sort of emphasize is that what Heraclitus and Cratylus both think is that because everything's always changing, there's no such thing as a stable identity. Not only is there no such thing as stable being, right? Parmenides definitely thinks that there is a thing called stable being. But not only is there no stable being, according to Heraclitus and Cratylus, but there's no stable anything. Why? It's because everything's always changing. I mean, if the atoms of my iPhone are constantly flowing in and out of the atoms of this piece of paper, according to Heraclitus and Cratylus, there's no such thing as an iPhone and there's no such thing as a piece of paper because they're changing all the time. They're flowing in and out of each other, right? And the only other thing I want to say about Heraclitus and Cratylus is that Cratylus one-ups Heraclitus because while Heraclitus says that you can't step in the same river twice, Cratylus says you can't even step in the same river once. Why? It's because there's no such thing as a river. Why? It's because if something's always changing, then it's not a river, right? I forget what the name of that weird cartoon character is that y'all told me about. Who can remind me of that? The little thing that's always changing all the time. I can almost remember. I did look him up. Yeah, Benton. I mean, is Benton a man? Is Benton a ghost? Is Benton an animal? No, because he's always changing, right? Good. Y'all, let's move to Plato's Socrates. On the final exam, I'm going to ask you a question about Plato's Socrates. It'll probably have something to do with the apology, and I just want to sort of say that what we find in the apology is Socrates being ironic, right? What is the big statement that Socrates makes? I mean, he says crazy things in the apology, right? So, for example, he says, the only thing and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, the only thing I know is that I don't know anything at all, right? That would be a form of Socratic irony. He also says things like, I'm the wisest man in the world because I don't claim to know that which I don't know. That too would be an example of Socratic irony, right? Irony is whenever, you know what? I'm going to look up irony. I'm going to look up irony in this dictionary of literary terms and literary theory. Let's see what it says for irony. It's a very long definition. I'll just read the first. Oh, look, it talks about Socratic irony. Irony, oh, wow. First recorded in Plato's Republic, where it has approximately the meaning of a glib and underhand way of taking people in. In Platonic dialogues, Socrates himself takes the role of the iron or dissembler, and assuming the pose of ignorance and foolishness. Y'all, that's what I would say is Platonic irony or Socratic irony. Socratic irony is whenever you pretend to be ignorant, whenever in reality you're probably the smartest person in the room, right? It says that Socrates assumes the role of ignorance and foolishness, asks seemingly innocuous and naive questions which gradually undermine his interlocutor's case and trap him into seeing the truth. Hence, what is known as Socratic irony. Y'all, that's very good. So Socratic irony is taking an attitude of foolishness whenever in reality you're probably the smartest person in the room, okay? And there will be a question on the final exam about Socratic irony, all right? Now, in terms of Plato on myth and science, this is number 5 on the final exam review sheet. Plato on myth and science. We've already talked about this a little bit. Here's what I want to say. If you look at the pre-Socratics, like all the pre-Socratics that we've talked about in this class, especially Parmenides and Heraclitus, if you look at those pre-Socratics, I would argue that you can view them as engaged in a process or engaged in an effort of demythologization, right? In other words, they're looking at the Homeric gods, Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, etc. They're looking at those gods. They're looking at Homer and Hesiod, who wrote about those deities, and they're saying that's a bunch of BS, that's a bunch of bunk. And so they are in a process of demythologizing, where they say, we don't believe in myth. We think that myth is stupid. And what we're going to do is we're going to critique myths or mythologies. We're going to critique mythologies using our reason. Okay, that's what the pre-Socratics like Heraclitus and Parmenides and others do. And so in general, I would argue that those people are not big fans of myth. And so they are involved in a process or a process of demythologization. Well, what about Plato? What does Plato think about myth? Can y'all remind me of what we talked about earlier in the semester? What is Plato's stance on myth versus science, or in particular, myth? What does Plato think about myth? Does Plato give myth a thumbs up or a thumbs down? What do y'all think? Jared says, Plato thinks that myth has its place. There is something to be learned from stories that exist. I like that. Y'all, here's how I said it in the class, and I'll give you a freebie on this one. Plato is engaged in a process of demythologization, but he thinks that after he's done all of his demythologizing, there still remains a residue of myth that is irreducible and is true, okay? Remember, your final exam is going to be multiple choice, and so I will put this in a multiple choice format, but the bottom line is that Plato is both. He's a both and. On the one hand, he does engage in a process of demythologization. Plato thinks that the gods are stupid, right? He thinks that Zeus is stupid. And so he says, if you're using your reason, you would never worship a god like Zeus. And yet, and so in that regard, you can see how he is performing a process of demythologization. But on the other hand, if you read his works, Plato's works, there's still all sorts of myths that he appeals to, that he refers to, that he includes in his writing. And so, yes, he does want to purge myth and mythology of irrational elements, but he says there's something about myth that's irreducible and you can't completely get rid of it. And it's one of the main ways that we know truth, okay? So Plato does engage in a process of demythologization, or a project. That's the word I was looking for. He does engage in a project of demythologization. He wants to purge myth of irrational and unbecoming elements. But he says that after we've already critiqued it, there still remains a residue of truth in myth that we want to hold on to, okay? So I hope that that makes sense. That's number 5, Plato on myth and science. Aristotle on prime matter. There will be a question on your final exam on Aristotle and prime matter. Let me ask you this. On Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, what is on the opposite extreme from prime matter? Who can answer that question for me? What is on the opposite extreme of prime matter for Aristotle? Pure form. That's exactly right. Pure form. What's a synonym? Well, actually, that's number 7. That's right. Prime matter is sort of the opposite of pure form. Y'all, there will be a question about prime matter on the final exam. Good. Let me say a couple of other things about prime matter. I mean, prime matter is pure potentiality for Aristotle. It's utterly devoid of form. We did describe it kind of like a blooming, buzzing confusion. It's also the chaos of Genesis 1-2. Yeah, I think that about covers it. Okay, there will be a question on the final exam on prime matter. We just said that the opposite of prime matter for Aristotle is God. Now, who can tell me other names for God that Aristotle has? this will be a question on the final exam as well. What are some of Aristotle's other names for God? Theos, Jared. That's right. Theos. Right. What else? The unmoved mover. Now, I don't know who Jay-Z is. Sorry. Who is? Oh, Joe Zamora, probably. Good job. Okay, good. Joe and Jared say the unmoved mover. Richard says the prime mover. Good job. So, y'all, that's 3 names so far. Theos, the prime mover, and the unmoved mover. Now, and then Jared says thought thinking itself. That's right. Those are 4 different names for God. Y'all, there will be a question on that on the final exam, okay? Let's move to question 8, Descartes on the cogito. So the cogito is I think, therefore I am. I do want you to know that that is a form of reflexivity or recursivity. Because what is Descartes thinking about? He's thinking about his own thought. He's thinking about the fact that he's thinking. He's not thinking about a cup, right? If I say I'm thinking about the cup, then I am the subject. I'm the thinking subject, and the cup is the what? What is the cup? If I say I'm thinking about the cup, Matt is the thinking subject, but the cup is the what? The object. That's exactly right. But in the case of Descartes, he's not thinking about the cup. He's thinking about his thought. He's thinking about the fact that he's thinking. Okay? And so you see, that's a recursive form of thinking. You could say recursive, you could say reflexive. Either of those 2 words could show up on the final exam, but that's right. And remember, the point for Descartes of the cogito, or of the I think, therefore I am, that word cogito is the Latin verb for I think. So it's a verb, I think, okay? And remember, the point there is that Descartes is looking for a certain foundation upon which he can build other knowledge. And he thinks that he has found that certain knowledge in the cogito, in the fact that he thinks, therefore he is, okay? Good. Y'all, that gets us up to Nietzsche. And I really think that Nietzsche is going to be the easiest thing for you in some ways. Now, I've basically told you what's going to be on the final exam in terms of questions 1 through 8, Parmenides, Heraclitus, Cratylus, Plato, Aristotle, Descartes. Y'all, I think that for Nietzsche, I'm not going to sort of just tell you what's going to be on the final exam. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say there will be something from the Nietzsche documentary. There will be a question from the Nietzsche documentary, okay? And there will be a question on Greek tragedy. Something that, and when I say that there will be a question on the documentary, I mean something that we've discussed. Okay, there will be a question drawn from the Nietzsche documentary, and it will be something that we discussed. Similarly, there will be a question on Greek tragedy, and it will be something that we discussed. Okay, it won't be some random thing. It won't be super difficult. It will be something that you need to have watched the videos or read the text or watched the documentary, yes. But I'm not going to sort of just tell you exactly what it is right now. Okay? I don't want to make the class too easy. Okay, y'all, I have 450. I think what I'll do now, let's take the next 10 minutes and I'll just throw it open to any questions that anyone wants to ask, okay? And please don't be shy. Please don't be nervous or feel guilty or anything like that. What questions do you have for me, whether it's something about grades, something about the content of the course? Maybe you don't understand Descartes. It could be anything. Maybe it's about the final exam. What questions do you have for me? I'm just going to take about 5 or 10 more minutes, and we'll see if you have any questions. If no one has any questions, that's fine. We'll end the class a bit early. By the way, you can always text me or email me. You know by now that I have no problem with that. What questions do y'all have for the final exam? By the way, I still have about 4 or 5 essays that I need to grade. Sorry about that I haven't graded all of those yet. Yes, Mason, have I graded yours? I guess I haven't. Mason, yours must be one of the 4 or 5 that I haven't graded yet. I will have those essays graded in the next 24 hours. I'm very sorry about that. Again, I've graded almost all of them, all but about 4 or 5. Y'all, there's a few folks that didn't turn in your essays. If that's you, I need you to send me an email about that, okay? Megan, forgive me. Your paper grade will be in Canvas in the next 24 hours, okay? Marissa says, I know we have from noon to 9 to take the exam, but will it be timed? Marissa, I will not. Okay, Marissa, that's a good question. Y'all, let's see here. That is a good question, Marissa. Originally, the final exam was going to be a 2-hour period, right? Yeah, y'all, what I'm going to try to do is give you a 2-hour window in which to take the class. In which to take the final exam. I don't know if that's possible on Canvas. I'm going to let you take it anytime between noon on Wednesday, April 29 and 9 p.m. And if possible, I'm going to give you a 2-hour window. I don't want it to be longer than that because technically this is not an open book exam. You're not allowed to look up the answers. Okay. So I want to give you a 2-hour window. So thank you for that question. Oops. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Marissa and Justin. Emily asks, what was number 7 again? So Emily, number 7, you know what, Emily, I'm going to ask you to rewatch the video. Okay. It's on God, and we talked about 3 or 4 different names for God. Okay. Will the exam be proctored? No, it will not be proctored. So you're on your own to take the exam online on Canvas. Okay. Emily says, what was number 4? Emily, I'm gonna ask you to rewatch the video on that, okay? Emily, do you know that I posted this on Canvas? So I posted the 10 different question topics on Canvas. So number 4 will be on Plato's Socrates, and we talked about irony, okay? What other questions do y'all have? Y'all, it's been a good semester. It's been a strange semester. I think that you'll probably never forget this semester. Hopefully, by the time I teach at UT Tyler in the fall, I will be Dr. Matt Bolter, because hopefully I will have defended my dissertation in Ireland over the summer. That was supposed to happen about 3 weeks ago. Alas, a lot of disappointment in this coronavirus season. I'm going to give y'all 1 minute to ask more questions. I've enjoyed getting to know you guys. I'm sad. I really hate doing things on YouTube because I'm all about having personal relationships with my students, and that's frankly just impossible in this format. So I really hate that. Thank you, Richard. Any other questions, comments? I think I'm going to close the class a little bit early. Thank you, Jared. Y'all, if anyone has any questions, feel free to text me or email me. Again, if you haven't turned in your essay, please get in touch with me. And yeah, y'all, I will definitely invite you to the party at the end of my end of the semester party in the fall semester. That's a great idea, Joe. And I will remember to do that, God willing. Hopefully the fall semester will be somewhat normal, right? Okay, y'all, very good to be with y'all. May the force be with you and also with you. Good luck on the final exam, and thanks so much. Peace.